Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this special Future of Hospitality webinar brought to you today by our friends at Sona. Our topic is AI and people. And by the way, I'm Peter Martin. I'm founder of Peach 2020, and I'm going to be hosting today's conversation. We're here really to talk about all things artificial intelligence, the impact it's already having on the hospitality sector, and more importantly, what we see as the potential for it for change, for driving efficiencies, productivity, growth, hopefully in the months and years to come. And now my guest today to help me get to grips with this all-encompassing subject are Brian Trollip, who many of you will know is CEO of Dishoom, the award-winning Indian restaurant group with 10 locations in London, Manchester, Birmingham, Edinburgh, and soon in the United States, we all hope. And also with Permit Room, its new spin-off popping up in Brighton, Cambridge, and Oxford, a very busy business. Also joining us is Steffen Wulff Petersen, who's CEO and co-founder of Sona, which is a Google-backed business which really does have AI at its heart. Now, before we sort of dive into the real conversation, we've done actually some interesting research among 50 top hospitality leaders to get their views on AI, how it's already affecting their businesses, what they see about it. And by we, I mean Sona, CJ, by NQ and Peach 2020. Now, I'm going to keep coming back to the findings as we go through to keep the conversation going, because there's some really interesting findings in it. But there's a couple of things I want to start with, and let me read those out. One is, I think, the level of enthusiasm we found amongst those leaders, and dare I say, those leaders were from some of the biggest corporations in the sector and to new startups, but all in the group sector. All of them, majority were convinced that AI will be valuable for their businesses. And actually, interestingly enough, 39% were confident it will actually be transformational for hospitality. So in a sense, that's our starting point. Why is there that real enthusiasm? But the other thing I think we found out was there's a real knowledge gap. And I don't think hospitality is any different to other sectors. Most 59% are curious, but admit to needing more information about AI, how AI will play out. And only a few, just 17%, said they were well enough informed to understand the options for their business. And those guys tended to be in the bigger corporations. So this is what we've got. We've got enthusiasm, we've got curiosity, but not really sure about how it works. So let's dive in, and let's start with you, Brian, with Dishoom, because I know you have adopted AI, and let's talk about some of that. But how do you see AI? What do you understand by AI, and how have you, as it were, taken those first steps?
Well, I think we're still very much in the enthusiastic and curious camp, but we are pretty certain that AI is like the beginning of the internet again. It is changing the world very quickly, and I think it's just relatively inconceivable that most businesses aren't going to be adopting or significantly influenced by AI by the end of this year. And our view is just that, it's transformative in so many ways that just allows you to look at data in a much more objective way and to see bits of your business that might have been a little bit hidden before, and to just have better, stronger conversations so that you can concentrate on the things that are important, which is obviously looking after your guests and your team. And I think it just is going to make business a lot more efficient when costs are getting trickier and trickier for everybody, and just help us to do our jobs a lot better.
Yeah. So in terms of looking at where did you start? I mean, we're going to go into some of the detail of what you're doing, but how do you come to the decision about which bits of the business you're going to use AI in first?
Well, I think for us, I mean, guest experience and team experience are the two things that we spend all of our time and energy on. And somebody contacted us just to sort of say that they could give us better insight into the way that we were looking after our guests and help us to see across the board where we're doing a brilliant job and where we might be able to improve in a really objective way. Because, I mean, currently the tools we have are getting in and seeing things firsthand, and then also maybe getting some mystery diners and things like that in, which are also really, really helpful. But they don't necessarily give you anywhere near as much data and insight as you would want to just help you understand how you're doing across all the different metrics that make up a brilliant guest experience. And I met the guys at Servo AI. They were the first people that we spoke to integrate AI into our business. And they said, look, we can plug this into your CCTV system. It'll give you objective data that tells you how many seconds it takes on average for you to get over and greet a guest at the table, and then pick all the points that really matter to you that you think make up a good technical guest experience without all the personality that then needs to come along with that. And we'll measure those for you, and we'll tell you how you're doing against the metrics that you've set for yourself. And we did that. And I guess the first thing that really surprised us was that our intuitions on some things were way off. We thought we were doing better in some areas than we were. We thought we were doing less well in some areas than we were. And this just helped us all to get on the same page and have a brilliant conversation that wasn't batting intuitions around, and helped us to see what was actually going on everywhere, what was going on differently across different restaurants, and just allowed our restaurant teams and our management teams to have brilliant conversations that helped them understand where some of their teammates had figured things out that they might not have figured out just yet, and to work together to just deliver a better guest experience.
Hey, let's come back on bring Steffen in, because I think that's quite interesting, because one of the fears is about it's going to change the experience, but what you're talking about is making life better for your teams and actually bringing them together even more. And I think that I like this thing about intuition as well. It's about augmented intuition, perhaps we're talking about in terms of AI, but there's another thing. But Steffen, you come here into the hospitality sector with that more tech background, with that AI background. I suppose from our point of view, how do you define AI? How do you see its development, and particularly when you're looking at the hospitality sector?
Yeah. Well, I think what sort of Brian is laying out is exactly where things are at the moment. And so while AI is kind of raging ahead at full speed, investing sort of tens of billions of dollars by the very biggest companies in the world, that's advancing all very quickly, yet it's still very early days in hospitality. And I think that's because it's sort of a two-phased approach, where the really big tech companies out there like Google, Meta, Twitter, they need to go and OpenAI, they need to go and build the foundational models, the AI models that we ultimately will need in this second phase in sort of business software, to go and wrap our software around those AI models and then deliver the AI value into sectors like hospitality. So the first phase is raging on, going really quickly. And as consumers, we can start to use these tools already, and maybe our kids are using them more in school than we feel we are at work right now. And that's probably kind of a realistic reflection on kind of where the industry is today. But now those models are starting to become so good. And Brian's example of Servo is a good example, right? Where really good AI models were developed in the last sort of year or two for understanding video, which was a really, really complicated task prior to the level of AI that we now have. And then that gives a company like Servo the opportunity to say, great, I'm going to take that model and I'm going to wrap my technology around that, because the AI model will not know from the CCTV data, who's an employee and which employee and which ones are guests, and what is it we want to kind of measure, time to get the first drink and time to get the food out and things like that. And so you kind of need the models to get ready, and then the business software companies can start to build that hospitality specific value add around those models. And I think that's just starting to see now.
And let's talk about that, because it's quite interesting, because in a sense what you're saying is, quite rightly, what sounds very simple is actually very complicated in terms of what's behind the scenes to make it happen. But Brian, in terms of tracking that guest experience in your restaurants, essentially what you're doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're tracking people through CCTV. So you're getting that data back. So what sort of data are you getting back, and how, you were saying you're sharing that data and it's great for your team. So what sort of data you're getting back, and how has that changed the way you're changing operations? Is it just down to speed, or is it, as you say, changing your perspectives on things, because intuition is quite enough?
I think I wondered why I felt slightly a twinge when you said you're tracking people through the CCTV, but I think I'll talk about that a little bit. I think this is a really, really powerful tool, and I think how you use it and what your motivations are for using it are really, really important. And I think for us, we set out not to track people through CCTV, but to track actions, and then to make them super objective, and to make sure that we weren't in any way ever tracking individuals or making anything transferable back to an individual. And I think you probably can use CCTV and AI to do that. But for us, we use it just to get really clean, clear, objective data. And we were really conscious, actually, about putting it into the business from a cultural perspective. We were quite worried that people would think it was a bit Big Brother. And for that reason, I think we presented it as an opportunity to our team to explore, and allowed them to sort of buy in and get excited about it long before, as opposed to us just putting it in and saying, hey guys, it's a new system, go and run with it. That actually garnered a huge amount of excitement, because most of our team is younger than I am and is using AI all over the place anyway, and really understands its value and its potential, and how much it can just really help get to the bottom of things and crunch data in a way that like hundreds and hundreds of human beings just couldn't. So they got really excited about it. And what we started to notice quite quickly was our teams just having much better conversations, because the conversations were really objective. There was nothing emotive in them. There was just clean, clear, objective data in front of them that they could then analyze and figure out, what to do with and how to make their jobs a little bit better. For us, what we look at is all the little bits of the service experience that we think make up a brilliant guest experience if you do them consistently every single time. So how quickly we get over to greet a guest when they arrive, how quickly after that we take their first drinks order, how long it takes them for their drinks to arrive at the table, how long it takes for us to take their food order, how long it takes for the food order to arrive at the table. We look at how long drinks are waiting on the pass. Coffees, you can look at that specifically. Go, right, if I'm putting coffees up, how many seconds is it taking for us to get the coffee off the pass and to the guest? So is it arriving hot for that guest every single time? Food, you can do exactly the same thing. So I think the possibilities in terms of what you can analyze are limitless, really. And once you've set out your parameters and you've got AI doing it, it's like having thousands and thousands of people analyzing this for you and then giving you the data. So really, I think it's pretty limitless what you can look at.
Yeah, I mean, Steffen, interesting in terms of advice you'd give to people, companies like Dishoom, although they're already there, about how you get acceptance. Because what's quite interesting, as Brian was saying, is, and perhaps we forget, is that our employees, it's a bit like social media and tech in general. They're using it in their day-to-day lives, even if we, as slightly older, much older, are not using it. So in terms of how do you break down, because there's always this sense in the media and perhaps the broader public that it's a Big Brother problem, it's going to change our lives. But how do you what advice do you give on reassuring people?
Yeah, I think the younger generations are just by default much more comfortable with this, and are sort of coming to expect these things. You see how quickly school kids are using GPT and all the other sort of tools out there. So one of our customers did a survey. This was in social care, but they surveyed a couple of hundred frontline caregivers and asked them what AI tools they were using in the line of work. And amongst 200 employees, they found nearly 20 AI tools that they didn't know about. And they were using them to do really work-related things like writing care plans, sensitive stuff. And 14 of them were actually using that data for training, so it wasn't a safe way to do it. And so I think the reality that we see everywhere is that probably teams on the ground are using AI in various different ways. And of course, you need to do what Brian is doing and make sure that it's kind of used in the right way and get teams on board. But they're probably more on board and maybe further ahead than kind of what we think already. And actually, we're seeing a lot of companies now starting to write AI policies internally just to try and get the initial usage that's probably happening already under control, and try to lock down tools that wouldn't be good to use for work, and only allow those tools that they deem to not be sensitive in the way that they are using the data, like ChatGPT, for instance, and kind of lock that down on laptops and things like that. So I think it's important, but I think it'll almost be a bigger issue how to control it as opposed to getting people on board.
But that first thing is, talk to your teams because they can probably help you. But presumably you can use AI to actually write your AI code of practice, as it were.
Yeah, as long as you use an unbiased one.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, Brian, have you actually, from your experience, have you got a sort of a AI policy document yet, or are you still playing around with stuff? Have you actually sort of got that long-term strategy or even short-term strategy?
We're working one up, but we're also still trying to get our heads around it and to understand sort of what's useful and what's not, and we're in that exploratory stage. So I think we're going to have to move pretty quickly on it because AI is everywhere now. It is just so unbelievably powerful that there aren't many things it's not going to be able to help you with, but there are going to be some pretty serious watch outs. And I think having maybe somebody in your business who spends a lot of time understanding this and can get their heads around what great systems look like for your business, what bad ones look like, is probably going to be pretty important. And at the very least, just investing pretty quickly, because we're already behind, in educating ourselves and figuring this all out is really important. Like I just don't think it's optional anymore, because it's just a part of the world. It's like when the internet was invented and then it was everywhere. Trying to sit and pretend that wasn't going to impact your business, this would be the same thing, because it's really is going to have at least that big an impact on the world.
I think it's interesting putting some context, going back to the research as well. It certainly in terms of resistance. So we did ask people about what were the main barriers to adoption of AI in their businesses. 78% cited cost as cited lack of technical skill as the biggest barrier, then cost by 61%, and unproven ROI by 47%. In fact, reflecting what you're saying, Brian, that actually frontline resistance was not seen as a problem by companies already in there. So that's perhaps overbaked, and then it is about engagement. But coming back to that thing about skill as well, as we've been talking, you can get that, see what's on the site, and obviously there are companies like Sona out there. So I mean, how are you playing? Is it talking to other operators, Brian? Is it talking to more AI specialists? How do you get your head round that and get those technical skills to actually help you build that strategy and where you go next?
I think I'll first start by saying I think that technical skills bit is the bit to crack. The cost bit, I don't think that AI should be costing your business money. I think it should be saving money through efficiency. And I think it is important to think about. I think there's huge opportunity if you're putting AI into your business for it to save you money, to make you more efficient, to help you find opportunities and eliminate waste. And I think it's just so powerful in looking at your data that it really should be doing that, if, in my view, if you're using it to its full potential. So I would have thought that there shouldn't be a huge amount of cost involved, and that it should actually be saving money on that front. Yeah. In terms of the education piece, I think that's the bit that is really, really important. And we are by no means the experts. I think we are just approaching this with a beginner's mind. We are talking to people who understand AI a lot better than we do, people who've implemented it in different ways into their businesses, and really understanding the things that were a problem for them, the things that were brilliant for them. There's no one we're not really talking to just to try and get our heads around this at the moment, wherever they're from. And I think we've not brought anybody in-house to specifically look after AI for us, but we are exploring that as a possibility, because we think it's probably going to be necessary, particularly in this year, as we sort of figure out which systems are brilliant and are going to be really helpful, and which systems we sort of want to keep out of our business.
Yeah. Now, yeah, Steffen, I mean, you know, what about the cost thing? Obviously, you're selling tech, but I mean, you know, how cost effective can it be to? Because in a sense, you know, there will be some investment, maybe more in time, but there'll be a return on it. So perhaps picking up that cost and the perceived cost and the unproven ROI. Is there a proven ROI?
Yeah, I think that, but probably these AI products for hospitality are going to fall into two categories. Some tools that replace tools that you already had today, and just now that they sort of come with AI, a bit like a car that's self-driving replacing a normal car. And they will roughly cost the same. You know, a self-driving car isn't that much more expensive than the new BMW compared to the old BMW. And so there should be no additional cost. And then you have additional kind of new tools that you weren't using today. For instance, like what Brian is doing with Servo, which is a little bit of new cost, but it's not like you're building data centers and hiring AI researchers and anything like that, right? You're just buying a piece of software. So you're probably talking about some tens of thousands of pounds, but if that can make you realize how fast or slow you were at sitting people down, you're going to be earning that back in a day. And so I think generally we're not talking about huge like infrastructure investments here. We're just talking about software vendors like you've been buying already for the last 10 years. It's just that now they come with AI, and therefore there will be partly some tools that you have already that you can replace with smarter ones, and then partly there'll be a couple of new options here and there. And I imagine all areas of hospitality in the guest, if you think about guests, I mean, I've read a lot about what's going on there, and you'd think that AI could do a lot to understand your guests a lot better on a much more granular, deeper, more personal level, and so that you'd be able to communicate with them in a much more sort of bespoke way online, ultimately with a view to get them in more. And once they come in, you can decide whether you want to utilize that data, because like technically you should be able to deliver a Beverly Hills hotel type experience, because you can know everything about them, where they like to sit, what they like to eat, are they going to bring their family or not? Do you want me to just bring over that glass of Cabernet, or do you want to actually look at the wine list because you know everything about them? And maybe we can start to create, AI can help create more better experiences for guests, which hopefully will build a closer relationship, make it better for staff to work there, and ultimately bring the whole equation up.
And I think that is a fundamental. Oh, by the way, everybody listening in your offices, home, coffee shops, or wherever, if you want to ask a question, there's a chat there. And just to remind you, we'll be providing the full set of research findings to everybody later. But let's pick up that thing about the experience, because here we are in an industry. We can't ignore the context we're in. It's tough times. We're going to have more costs being put put on the business, particularly through NIC, and a lot of that is seen around staff costs, but generally as costs. And one of the things we've been talking about is two areas to concentrate on this coming year: is one, product, and the other is productivity. Now, you're talking about product, and I think perhaps sometimes we don't talk enough about that, because that is the experience. It's a food, it's a drink, it's what Brian's tracking in Dishoom about how quickly you get food to people, how you make sure that experience is fundamental. I think, you know, you've made a brilliant case there, Steffen, for the use of AI and you have, Brian, as well, to understand that experience. And dare I say, going back to the research, guest feedback, and also marketing, to tell people what you're doing is seen as two major areas by operators out there already. I think the other thing, going back to productivity, let's pick up on that. And that, you know, we've seen, well, your Brian saying, the research is saying that your frontline teams are actually willing to engage. So an obvious area we've been talking about is certainly your area of specialities and expertise, Steffen, is around staff, around scheduling, is about forecasting. How do we make, you know, how do we do more with less, potentially, in terms of people? How do we keep the culture? How do we, you know, recruit the right people? How do we retain the right people? So that is still a fundamental issue, because we, you know, that core element of what hospitality is about is not changing. But how can AI make that better? How can we make sure our teams are on side, make sure we're using our teams effectively, both for our own bottom line, but also for their experience as well?
Yeah, so there's probably two different areas there from sort of a tech perspective. One is big computational tasks that's become a lot better now with AI. So things like forecasting, you know how important it is to forecast what's actually going to happen at each restaurant every day, every hour. And that used to be pretty rudimentary, and now we just have bigger, better computers available to us. And so that means that we can look at much more data, internal data, external data, maybe 10, 20, 30 different sources of data. And it means that we can be more accurate, and we can build site-specific models. So they are sort of more accurate, which is important for the business overall, but for the experience of employees and for a manager, you can now build a model that is specific to your restaurant. And so you'll start to trust it and start to engage with it, because it's better for you, because it understands that you're next to the tube station or the theater or whatever it might be, right? It understands which school holidays impact you. And so it should create a better experience for managers, because they can see that it's specific to them and it's helping them. And so I think AI generally is kind of there to help teams. Anyway, that's the sort of the more predictive side of things. And then the other side of it is like what Brian's been talking about. It's like getting an army of additional people. And I think very much about that, about digital humans. You should think of AI as, and that's what's called agentic or agents, is that they can start to deliver digital humans for you that are going to work for free or almost free. And they can help your managers, your area of managers, your CFOs with lots of different things that you just can't do today. And again, that's not going to take jobs away from them. It's just going to enhance what they do and make life better for them. So I think it'll be welcome.
Yeah. In terms of you, Brian, as well, in terms of the next stage, you know, the guest experience, you've got that engagement with your teams. Is scheduling and making their lives better? Are you already going down that line in terms of use of AI, or where is that on your checklist?
We're looking at it, just because I think for us, again, if you're thinking about your team and your guests and nothing else, it's really important to be getting your scheduling right and to make sure you have enough people on when you need them, and are not burning £50 notes when there aren't any customers in your restaurant, right? So, and I do think the tools we've had today have been pretty rudimentary on that front, and do rely on, us predicting things in blocks a little bit, and therefore getting it wrong every now and then. And I just think there is the opportunity with AI for it to say, you know, when it goes from 30 to 32 degrees on a Tuesday in January, this happens in your restaurant. And I think it's just able to crunch so much data and then put it into your scheduling that I think there's just real opportunity there for it to be so accurate that you can very rarely get caught out by not having enough people on, or by having too many people on when you don't need them there. So just by shifting that around a little bit. And then things are moving around, actually. We've just noticed over the last few years, patterns are changing, etc. I think just spotting pattern changes that you might be a little bit later to get to. Maybe it's in the things that your guests are ordering in general. It might be shifting away from alcohol to more non-alcoholic drinks. That might be is an obvious one, but there might be 3 or 4 or 5 things like that that you're not necessarily noticing or spotting. And I think you could be getting brilliant insight on things like that, right? If you have a combination of guests walking into your restaurant and reservations, I think just trying to optimize how many reservations you take when, etc. You could probably do a lot with that. So I just think anywhere where you need better data, and you have, you know, good data coming out of your systems that is going somewhere and being stored somewhere, and you just need something to crunch that, I think there's real opportunity.
Yeah. Well, we're getting some questions coming in now, and they're picking up on that, you know, the importance of data and insight coming through. But one of the questions that is reflected in a number of comments, this one from David Carmichael, there's others like this. This is about, given the difficulties we're talking about today experienced by Apple in terms of the accuracy of their what's coming out of their AI and news content. How do you reassure people? How are we reassured of the validity of AI insights? You know, are there anomalies? Are they getting it right? If there are anomalies, how do we know? And I think that's probably a sense of it. You know, from your position, Steffen, as someone who is providing that technology, how do you make it as foolproof as you possibly can?
Yeah, and maybe that's why there's still a little bit of delay in between some of these models just getting released to the general public, and you use it to ask it silly questions or write essays or job descriptions where if something isn't 100% perfect, then it still is sort of okay. The downsides are kind of limited. Whereas when it comes to business services, you know, the impact could be sort of far greater. And so, but you know, there's starting to be lots of technology that sit on top, right? So you use one LLM to ask a question, and you'd use another one to double check that question, what comes out, right? So there's lots of technology now, a lot of infrastructure that everyone's working on, including us, right? That essentially weeds out all, you know, errors and sort of get to the right conclusion. It's a bit more expensive and it takes slightly longer, but in those areas where you must be 100% right, it's worth doing that. And that's very much possible. You won't see that in the consumer app in ChatGPT, but you'll start to see that in the way it's being used in businesses. So you can, there are ways to get around those things. And that's probably one of the things that are taking like a little bit longer.
Yeah. Are you finding that, Brian, as well? I mean, in terms of, you know, are you trusting? I mean, how long does it take to trust what you're getting back?
Look, I think there are going to be some inaccuracies that come through as things get built up. But I think for us, we treat it as another tool, right? It's not telling us what to do. It's giving us information, and then we sense check that information. So far, truthfully, it's been a lot more accurate than a human doing the same thing would have been. And we're finding that. The data is pretty clean that we're feeding in, which means there's not a huge amount of room for error necessarily that in terms of what's coming out. As we ask it to do more and more complicated things, there might be, and I think there might be an element of sense checking required for that, and repair and building, etc. is gonna happen, right? But I think it just does seem to be true that you're going to get a more reliable, accurate answer from AI, particularly as it gets more and more sophisticated, than you're going to get from a human being, right? There are inconsistencies in what we do as people. There might be some in what comes through from AI, but I would have thought that we're all going to be trusting the data that comes through from AI quite a lot, quite soon, because it's just pretty powerful.
Can I say two super quick things there, Peter?
Please do.
Number one, Brian, you make a great point is, well, what did we used to do before? And if what we used to do before was once in a while a human spot check something, and suddenly we just got 100% kind of visibility, even if that's 98% accurate, then that's still just more than what you had before, right? Because it was wildly inaccurate what you had probably had before. And so there's kind of comparing it to what you had before. But then there are sort of other areas where it must be 100% accurate. For instance, I think it was Tom at Pizza Pilgrims that were working on an internal chat bot for the sort of support tickets internally. And so staff could ask you questions, 24/7, and a really cool thing to be working on. And but there's certain areas where you want it to be 100%, right? And so, for instance, on allergens, and I think Tom shared recently that they had been sort of writing out those specific answers to allergens, so that you're not trusting the LLM to come up with answers to allergens. You write them out, so you know that they'll be 100% right. And then the things that are a bit softer, how do I make this cocktail? No need to write that out, right? That you just let LLMs kind of run with that flow. So you can sort of put suspenders on it and make it extra safe.
I think there's another question coming through. Sort of, it's really from Rich Jinks. It's about the so what's, Brian, of the fact that, okay, you'll notice that the coffee has been sat on the past for half an hour or whatever it is, not long. But it's okay. So what do you do? One, what do you do about it? Two, how do you find the causes of that as well? How do you track that? It may be distracted staff. It may be the fact you haven't got enough staff on. How are you following through those insights?
Well, I think in the first instance, you can't do anything unless you know, right? So knowing and looking at something in the first instance allows you to then go and find the problem and then solve it. So us knowing that in a particular restaurant on a Sunday afternoon, coffees take longer to get to a guest, it allows us to ask the question why, and then we as a team will go and solve that problem. We'll figure it out, we'll get to the answer. And I think what we're finding is that it's just creating better conversations. It's giving us the objective data. It's not a mystery diner coming and sitting in your restaurant once a week or once a month, whatever it is you do, and then us judging the coaching that we give to our team for the entire month based off that one snapshot experience. It's saying, well, this is what you did at 8 o'clock on a Monday, this is what you did on a Tuesday, and giving you really accurate data that allows you to have a better conversation that our teams are engaging with a lot more. Because you can drive behavior by talking about things that are brought up in a mystery diner, but sometimes your team say, well, that's not reflective of the work that we're doing day in and day out, and I don't trust that. And then they get a little bit annoyed by the fact that you're putting a lot of pressure on something because somebody came in and said this wasn't right this time. Whereas we're finding people are engaging a lot more with the data because they just believe it. It's largely, it's really quite accurate. And now we're saying, right, we'd like to get a coffee off the pass in 30 seconds, and it's taking us a minute, or it's taking 2 minutes. Yeah. Well, that's a great conversation for the team to have. Well, how do we do that? That's for us to solve. So I don't think AI goes in and solves every single problem for you and then is going to replace all of our people and start taking over hospitality. But it does give you the data that allows us to have better conversations and come up with better solutions.
Yeah. Interesting. One of the things, picking up on another question here about how do we bridge that knowledge gap which came out of that first survey question and results. One of the things I think I know you're doing, Brian, and what hospitality has always been good at is collaboration, because unlike other sectors, people do talk to each other. I know you'll be talking to, other leaders like Roy Ellis and Marcello at San Carlo and whatever to share. Steffen, on your side, though, there's a question here about, do you partner with other digital agencies who focus on hospitality to help bridge that gap? How much collaboration is there on the supply side?
Yeah, so I think we collaborate with other vendors, but we haven't yet seen, there's lots of companies, Accenture, and then sort of the smaller versions that provide consultancy around technology, and I think in the ones we've seen in hospitality have not sort of yet gotten really to the point of AI, but I'm sure that they will, in the next sort of year or two. And so I'm sure that, so right now it seems the main source of information is to go to vendors directly. And of course, vendors are biased and will tell you whatever's in their interest. And so that's obviously a tough place. And so probably it'll be good to have some agencies that can do that. And I think they'll probably start to do that over the course of this year as just more tools become generally available. I think Accenture is saying that it became one of their biggest revenue lines, very quickly. And so I imagine the same will be the case. It takes for those agencies, they need to have customers asking them about this information and before they start to wise up on it. But I sense that's starting to happen now. And we're happy to collaborate with any of them, right?
Yeah. So look, we're coming to the end of the conversation, and we've still got some questions, and all of it, if we haven't answered your questions, I'm sure we will be picking those up and getting back to everybody as well. But a lot of them is, there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm, not only from the people we survey, but obviously from the audience as well. And I think we are at first steps on here and understanding it. As Brian, as you said, it's like the first days of the internet, and I dare I say I remember that well. At least you don't have to dial up, but still. But then again, life gets easier all the time. But to bring this together, and thank you guys for joining us this morning as well. Final thoughts about what are your next steps, and are there any? And perhaps I'm going to start with you, Brian. You've got that enthusiasm, you're getting that team building, you're looking at other areas. Two questions. What is the next area you're probably going to be focusing on? And what are there any sort of drawbacks you've come across, any particular problems you've come up with AI which you haven't perhaps anticipated?
I think, yeah, we're enthusiastic, but we're cautious and sort of got similar concerns to what most other people would have as well, I think. So our next steps, really simply, are learning more. It's just assuming that we don't know anywhere near as much as we need to know about this, and then just educating ourselves as much as possible. So I think that really does feel like the best thing. And then talking to people who have identified problems in the hospitality sector and are now starting to find solutions to those problems using AI, just being open to having chats and exploring that and understanding where people are and just going into those chats open-minded and seeing what's available there. And I think for us, I mean, I've always been quite opposed to switching up big systems in the business unless I believe that they're going to create significant impact just because of the pain of switching out a legacy system or a system that's been there forever. Certainly where we have implemented AI so far, it's been a lot easier and a lot more intuitive to our team than previous systems might have been. And that's pretty helpful because that's something that's definitely made me think twice about switching systems up previously, is the impact on the team and the business, the training required, all of that sort of thing. So thinking about that a lot and just trying to think about, if we are putting new things into the business, are they genuinely making the team's life better? Are there things that people are genuinely excited about? I saw a question asking whether we track the link between how happy our team are and how happy our guests are. We do in some areas, but I think more than anything else, it's just an intrinsic belief we have that if you look after your team correctly and they're really happy and having a brilliant time, there's a much better chance that they are going to care about making sure your guests have a brilliant time. And therefore, when we're thinking about AI, the fact that the teams are really happy and it's making their lives better, not worse, is massively important to us because we believe that's completely linked to whether or not your guests are happy. So we're just thinking about it, asking ourselves those questions. Does this genuinely make our team's life any better? does it genuinely make our guest life any better? Because we just don't believe in putting things in that create friction and are a pain for our guests or a pain for our team. So we're thinking about all of that in the round, largely just trying to learn a bit more, and be really open-minded about it, with a strong feeling that we need to do this and that there's just no way around. There's no way around it, and that it's not one of those things that you can bury your head in the sand about and assume that AI is not going to impact your business, because just our belief is that it will.
Steffen, last word for you. I mean, with Sona, you're coming to this sector. You're bringing new ideas. What are you learning about hospitality and how you develop that partnership around AI?
Yeah, I think there's some really forward-thinking operators, and I think like the previous topic we just had, there isn't so much consultancies and things sitting in the middle right now. There's just people working on AI. Like you mentioned, we're backed by our biggest investors is Google, specifically Google's AI fund in San Francisco. So we have a lot of AI resources, but we're not hospitality experts. So what we're trying to do is sort of bridge the gap and just have open conversations. Sona can do a bunch of things already, but there's way more things that we could do with AI. And so we're just interested in having those conversations in a very open-minded way. And that's what we've been doing over the last year in hospitality, and look forward to doing much more of that.
Yeah, well, bridging the knowledge gap is going to be key, and more collaboration. Well, thank you both very much for your time this morning. Thank you for all those of you listening in as well. So it's goodbye, and goodbye from me. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.